Nemo Radio is on the air.
A, B, C. A, always be B, C, closing. Always be closing. Always be closing.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Put that coffee down. Coffee's for closers only. Come after me! I'm a man! I'm 40!
Hey, it's John Nemo. Welcome back to another episode of Nemo Radio. If you haven't picked it up by now, I'm in the middle of sharing different sections, different chapters from the all-new, completely updated and revised edition of my book, LinkedIn Riches, How to Use LinkedIn for Business, Sales, and Marketing. Now, in this particular episode, I want to share the chapter on how to build the ultimate LinkedIn sales funnel. There is so much nuance that goes into this. There's so many different insights and ideas and strategies that I actually broke this up into several chapters. So this is kind of the overall introduction and then getting into some of the real tactical pieces. So without further ado, let's dive in. Chapter 5, the ultimate LinkedIn sales funnel. I got to start with a great quote. Ready? This one's from Zig Ziglar. Shy salespeople have skinny kids. I love that one. If you're talking about sales, you got to quote Zig Ziglar at least once. I want to start with a great story. This happened recently, and it just about drove me batty. And I was talking to a client who was unhappy. And the client was like, your program doesn't work. I haven't made any sales. This is a total failure. And I was like, okay. I stayed calm. I'm like, okay, well, I knew we had been generating a lot of leads for this client on LinkedIn. So I was like, okay, well, I'm curious where this is going, why they think it's a failure. So I said, okay, well, why don't you tell me what you're doing with the leads that we generate for you on LinkedIn? Take me through your exact process for every lead that we send your way. What are you doing with it? And the client's like, sure, okay. So I email them once, or maybe I leave them a voicemail, but if I don't hear anything back, then I just move on. I just assume they're not interested anymore. And I was just like, I'm sorry, what? Because another great quote, probably attributed to Zig Ziglar, is the fortune is in the follow-up. One email, one call, that's it, and you hope they come back. I can't, to go back to John McEnroe in the 80s at Wimbledon, you cannot be serious. What? So needless to say, this client was not a fan of that phrase, the fortune's in the follow-up, when it comes to lead generation and sales. But that's the truth. That's the reality. So again, speaking of selling, really understanding what does it take to build a successful sales funnel on LinkedIn. There's a lot of questions that you're going to need to answer. So first off, when do you consider someone a lead? Well, how do you qualify a lead? What's the most effective way to follow up with someone on LinkedIn that you think is a lead? How do you keep track of all these people? How do you keep track of all these leads on LinkedIn to make sure they don't slip through the cracks? When should you stop following up? When is it too much? When should you just give up and not follow up anymore with someone on LinkedIn who's interested, who is the lead, but has kind of gone quiet? Another question is, what's the best way to structure a sales conversation? So you generate a lead from LinkedIn. Now, how do you talk to them? How do you move them back and forth? How do you, ask for a sale? How do you close the deal? All that stuff. So we're going to unpack all that in this section. But before we do that, I just want to take a step back and kind of recap where we're at in this process. So if you look at the steps we've covered so far in the book, step 1 is obviously creating a client-facing profile. Step 2 is creating that one great piece of content, ideally an ebook. The next step 3, would be building a niche list of your ideal prospects on LinkedIn, ideally, using Sales Navigator, a paid subscription. Step 4 would be reaching out one-on-one to each person, doing that digital door knocking, using LinkedIn invites, in-mails, one-on-one messages, and of course, using that simple one-sentence message to offer that free piece of content, those free tips, whatever it is. And then the final step that we've covered to this point, step 5, for anyone that says yes to the free offer from that LinkedIn message, now you're going to move them into the sales funnel, which is where we're at this point in the book. So now we're going to spend the bulk of this section talking about step 5, right, which is once they say yes, moving them into a sales funnel and what that looks like. But before we do that, I'm going to go back a little bit to the previous step on LinkedIn outreach, and I want to talk about just a little bit more in depth on that approach. And when it comes to LinkedIn outreach and generating leads on LinkedIn, I talked about this before, but I want to just circle back because it's so important. The one way, the single best way to generate leads on LinkedIn has not changed since 2012. This phrase remains true. The money is in the mailbox, okay? On LinkedIn, all the money is in the mailbox. It's still in one-on-one messages to your ideal prospects on LinkedIn. To this day, and I've been doing it since 2012, I've gone through every possible approach the platform has and content and the latest new thing, the newest bells and whistles. It's still one-on-one messaging. There's a lot more noise right now, and we talked about that earlier with inboxes and how crowded it is and all that. Does not mean that it doesn't work. Remember the tools versus the tactics? The tool still works, one-on-one messaging. The tactics have to change in terms of how you message people. So again, I alluded to it earlier, but if you think about email marketing, again, back in the 90s, we loved email. It was the greatest thing ever. We made movies about email. Remember the movie You've Got Mail? Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan, romantic comedy. They made a movie about how great email was. We can fall in love over email. That's how much we loved email in the early 90s and mid 90s. Now we all hate it, right? It's just a chore, clean out your inbox, all that stuff. Does it mean email marketing is dead? Of course not. Everyone is still using email marketing. You should be building an email list. I still get a ton of leads from email marketing, right? Sell products and services via email. The same is true with LinkedIn messaging. Is everyone using LinkedIn messaging now to try to make sales? Yes. Are a lot of people, most people, doing a terrible job at it? Yes. Is the amount of spam and noise and annoying messages way up for all of us in our inboxes? Yes. Does that mean you shouldn't do it? No. Right? You just have to be smarter. And that's what I talked about earlier with kind of the one-on-one messaging approach. So I'm going to go a little bit deeper, again, just partly review, but partly also to give a little more nuance to each phase of what I talk about when I say the money's in the mailbox. So let's start here with LinkedIn invitations. So again, inviting, and again, I'll do a little bit of basics here in case you're new to LinkedIn or haven't used it forever. I got to remember not everyone has been on LinkedIn for 20 years or whatever it has been like for me. But start with LinkedIn invitations. So inviting someone on LinkedIn to be a connection and getting them to accept it is key. You want to invite people to connect and have them accept your invitation, because each person who accepts your invitation to connect becomes a first degree connection. What does that mean? That means you're now BFFs and you can text and talk nonstop. So if someone is a first degree connection and the money's in the mailbox, you can send them unlimited one-on-one messages back and forth without any issue. Now, as of this recording, LinkedIn does put a limit on how many first degree connections you can have. So if you're starting at 0 or maybe you have a few hundred or a few thousand, well, how big can I get this? Can I, there's a billion people on LinkedIn. Can I be first degree with all of them? No. As of this moment, no. The numbers change all the time, so I won't try to quote it here because if I do throw out a number, inevitably it'll change. But again, it's, you can connect well into the thousands as far as, I know right now. I mean, I'm up to, I think, 24,000 first degree connections, and I'm still adding more. So I haven't been cut off or anything like that. But again, the number changes all the time. It's LinkedIn sandbox. It's arbitrary. That's not something to get hung up on. The bottom line is you want to invite people to connect and have them accept it so that they become first degree. Now, let's get into the strategy a little bit with LinkedIn invites, because I know there's kind of a few different schools of thought on it depending on what guru or expert you talk to. So strategically, and depending on who you listen to, it's either a great idea to include a personal note on your LinkedIn invitation to each person, or it's the dumbest thing ever, right? So some people believe blank LinkedIn invites where you don't put any personal note get accepted at a higher percentage than a LinkedIn invite where you put a personal note. And what I mean by that is if I'm inviting someone to connect, LinkedIn will give me the option to say, hey, you're inviting John Nemo to connect. Do you want to include a personal note, or do you want to just send a blank invite like, hey, let's connect? So some people believe, leave it blank, more people accept. Other people believe, no, put a personal note in there like, hey, John, I'm a fan of your book, LinkedIn Riches. I'd love to connect. So I would say this. I've done both ways. I've seen both ways work. I think those methods can be tested. You can test both and see what works for you, meaning either include a personal note or just send blank invites. Try to like control the test. So do an audience of like the exact same type of people as far as job titles, whatever. Try a batch of 100 where you do a blank invite, nothing, and then do another batch with personal notes. See what works better, right? And then scale up whatever's working. It will change. It will depend. I've seen both work. So I think the bigger key, though, is going back to your LinkedIn profile and your LinkedIn headline. So if you remember back to your LinkedIn headline under your photo, the formula I want you to use for that is the service I provide for a target audience. So for me, it's done for you LinkedIn lead generation for small business owners and consultants. Whatever it might be, that's more important in my mind, because when someone gets an invite from you, it shows your photo and your LinkedIn headline. If your headline's clear of the service you provide and who it's for, that person can decide instantly, oh, I want to accept this invite because they provide a service for people just like me and I need it. So I want to connect with them and learn how they can help me. And that's the key part about your LinkedIn profile headline. You want to lead with the need. Lead with the need, right? If I have a need for LinkedIn lead generation and John Nemo's profile headline says, done for you lead generation, I'm going to, I have this need. I'm going to look at it. Oh, and he works with people just like me. As opposed to if my LinkedIn profile headline said, John Nemo, CEO, Nemo Media Group, you'd be like, who's this bozo wanting to connect with me? What's Nemo Media Group? Oh, he calls himself a CEO. What does that mean, right? Like, there's no interest there. There's no immediate what's in it for me, as opposed to a headline that says, oh, this is a service and it's for people just like me. That, I think, has a bigger impact on whether or not your invites get accepted as opposed to whether they're blank or have a personal note. So again, clarity is key. You want people to self-select. And if your LinkedIn headline is making it clear to prospects how you help people just like them solve a specific problem or realize a certain benefit, then they can decide. They can decide if they want to connect with you based on their current situation. Do I currently have a need? Is this currently a problem or a benefit I want to get? Because that's a great way to know this person is interested and a good lead. That's the beauty of LinkedIn invitations, is it's kind of that first step in qualifying, is someone a lead or not. If they're accepting your invitation and it's clear from your headline what you do, there's a good chance this person might be interested in your free tips, your content on this topic, because again, they're willingly connecting with someone who makes it clear, this is a service I do for people just like you. And as I said earlier, it's important to get as many first degree connections as possible. I'm going to break my own rule. I said I won't quote a number. I think the total amount of first degree connections you can get on LinkedIn as of this recording is somewhere around 25 to 30,000. That's my thought at this very second. It could change tomorrow, but that might help you knowing like where you're at. There are tools, by the way, if you've built, this is another question, I'm going off script a little bit, but if you have a ton of LinkedIn connections that are irrelevant, like say you hired someone to build your LinkedIn profile and build connections and you're connected to a bunch of, people in a country that you're never going to do business in, or job titles that are irrelevant, or college kids or whatever. If you're like, oh man, I'm going to run out of connections, there are tools that you can use to kind of disconnect from people in bulk. So right now it's complicated and kind of wonky. If you want to like trim your LinkedIn first degree connections, you have to do them one at a time. Well, say you have 23,000 connections and you're like, man, I bet 7,000 of these are people that will never do business with me. They're old coworkers. They're irrelevant. I wouldn't trim them all unless you're running out of space. One of the things with LinkedIn is the bigger your network is, the better. So the more first degree connections you have, the more kind of juice you have in terms of like, discoverability on the platform, in terms of how it'll surface people. Now, it is important to build your LinkedIn connections strategically, meaning you want to invite and connect with as many of your prospects as possible. You don't want to be connecting with just willy-nilly random people. So it's important to kind of protect your inbound invites too. You'll get incoming inbound invites, everyone and their grandmother will want to connect with you. Filter those out, like reject ones that aren't a clear prospect for you, or reject ones that don't look like a clear, maybe affiliate or, person who can connect you to leads or something like that. So you don't need to connect with commercial cleaning services if you're never ever going to market a service to them, if you never have a need, if that's not going to be something you ever want. I would not accept those invites. They're not going to do you any good. You want to save those bullets, save that space to connect with more prospects, if that makes sense. So with LinkedIn, your network does end up being your net worth. The more prospects you're connected to at the first degree, the more leads you're going to generate, and then the more sales you're going to make as a result. So again, protect your invites, be strategic in the lists that you build. Send them the invites, test them with either a personal note or leave them blank. And the last thing I'll say about LinkedIn invites before I move on is there is a limit to them. As of this recording, LinkedIn limits how many invites you can send in a given day, week, month. That number I'm not going to try to quote because it changes a lot. So be strategic with your invitations, how many you send, which ones you accept, because there is a limit. You'll run into it at LinkedIn. If you try to do too many in too short of a period, it'll say like, hey, you're out of invites. You have to wait until this date and we'll give you more. There is a way to withdraw LinkedIn invites that don't get accepted after a certain period of time. So that's another way to maybe free up some space. Again, I wouldn't get hung up on it too much. The key is just to consistently build your first degree connections. And the way that you do that is building lists of your ideal prospects with Sales Navigator or other search filters, and then sending people an invitation to connect. Next up is what I call LinkedIn messaging magic. As I already outlined earlier, when someone becomes a first degree connection, they accept your invitation. Now you can send them as many one-on-one messages as you like. And it's important to note these days, LinkedIn's inbox is more like texting or DMing, direct messaging, than it is emailing. So if you're not really super familiar with it, LinkedIn's inbox feels more like texting. That's why short messages work really well, emojis, things like that. You can do attachments and everything else, but that's why I love that one sentence message. The ideal approach is going to be this 1-2 punch. Step 1 is getting someone to accept your invitation to connect. Step 2 is sending them a one-on-one message once you get connected. And that's where, to go back to what we talked about earlier in the book, you want to just use that simple one-sentence message as your first LinkedIn message. Right after you connect, you're going to send a message along the lines of, hi, first name, should I send over my best tips on blank? For franchise consultants, this is what I send. Hi, first name, should I send over a free digital copy of my ebook, LinkedIn Lead Generation for Franchise Consultants? Or I might send, hi, first name, would it be helpful for me to send over my best free tips on how franchise consultants can generate quality leads here on LinkedIn? Now, the idea behind this is, again, you're picking your target audience and you're offering free tips. That's the one sentence. So if you've got the content already created as an ebook and the title has the name of, that prospect in it or a specific benefit they would want, you can try that. Like, should I send over a free copy of my digital ebook? Insert the title. Or you can say, would it be helpful for me to send my best tips on a benefit your client wants, a pain point they want solved, specific for, insert the type of prospect, the job title, the company name, etc. So those are what you're going to want to use for that first one-on-one LinkedIn message. And again, once people say yes to that, then you deliver the free content and you start personalizing the follow-up. One other strategy you can try with these one-on-one messages is, I'm a fan of Chris Voss. If you have heard of him, he wrote the book called Never Split the Difference. Great guy, former FBI hostage negotiator. So anybody that talked to terrorists that writes a sales book, I'll listen to. But he has this thing called a no-oriented question. So if you're not familiar with it, here's how it would look as a LinkedIn message, a one-on-one message. So instead of saying, should I send over my free ebook, or would you like to see my free tips on blank? Here's how he would write it as a no-oriented question. Hi, first name. Would it be a horrible idea for me to send over my best free tips on blank? Would it be a terrible idea if I sent over my best tips on this? would it be a ridiculous idea for me to send over blah, 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 blah? The idea with it is, again, Chris Voss calls it a no-oriented question. The strategy is you're framing the question in a way that makes the other person feel more in control. So it kind of works against that typical fear of commitment people have. Oh, if I say yes, what does this mean? Am I on the hook for something? Even if you're offering free tips, sometimes there can be that resistance. So obviously the idea would be if you say, hey, would it be a horrible idea for me to send over these free tips? The person can reply, no, it's not a horrible idea at all. Send it over. Because they feel more in control saying no than they do saying yes. Think about it. It feels less natural for someone to reply, yes, that would be a horrible idea. Do not send me your tips, right? They would feel kind of like, that's kind of rude. No matter what approach you want to try, whether you want to try these no-oriented questions or the ones I outlined earlier, the key with LinkedIn that I've learned over the years is test, tweak, and adjust. So test. Your market will tell you what works. So try some variations. You don't have to do all these word for word, line for line. Try and test and tweak and adjust. Scale up what's working. Not all prospects are created the same. Not all audiences are the same. Not all niches are the same. Maybe the no-oriented question works better with a certain type of person than it does with another one. Perhaps, offering an ebook in a message works better with this audience versus offering just free tips. You need to see, right, and let your market tell you what they think. The beautiful thing about LinkedIn is this is all digital, so you can start and scale it and see what works and do more of it. It's not like you have a garage full of books with a title printed on them and you're stuck with it. It's, you can send 10, 20, 30 messages and then compare those to another 10, 20, or 30, do an A/B test. Oh, that one works a lot better. That got 15 replies. That one got 1 reply. Let's use the one that got 15 and do more of those. So that's the key thing. One reminder, if you want to test and tweak, keep it simple. Simple sells. Simple, clear, and fast. Do not use industry jargon. Do not use acronyms. Do not use fancy words. Don't use long-winded sentences. I will say this until my larynx blows out, but clarity is the key. Short and simple so that a child can understand what you're saying. Hey, would you be interested in my best free tips on blank? Simple, easy. Oh, I get it. That's what's in it for me if I say yes. Consider the frazzled brain most prospects have when they're going through social media. They're probably standing in line for coffee. They're going through their LinkedIn inbox, just trying to clear things out. They don't want to have to think. They don't want to have to work, right? They don't want to have to put a lot of effort in. So just make it easy. Yes or no, simple, one sentence. And this gets into another point, how and why LinkedIn messaging has changed. Now, the advice I'm giving you right now as I record this ebook is different than what I would have told you 5 or 10 years ago. In the past, I might have said, hey, once you make a connection with someone on LinkedIn and they become a first-degree connection, start with some small talk, introduce yourself, ask them questions, try to get them conversing back and forth. So, 5, 10 years ago, I might have said, hey, have your first message, just say, nice to meet you, thanks for connecting. Hey, curious, tell me more about what you're up to. How's work? How's life? Blah, blah, blah. Like these days, what I have seen on LinkedIn is people simply don't have the mental energy to do it. They just don't. They don't have the mental energy to put thought and effort into answering those types of questions, especially from a random new connection on LinkedIn. I would argue this. People want today to think and expend as little energy as possible when they're replying to your LinkedIn messages. So if you're asking anything other than a simple yes or no question, you're making the other person do too much work. They won't do it. They just won't reply. So if you're like, hey, could you tell me, the biggest challenges you're dealing with work and why they are, and like people don't want that. But if you're like, hey, do you want my best free tips on how to overcome this obstacle you might be facing? Sure. Right? It's much easier for me to hit reply to that. That's why as I record this, that one sentence LinkedIn message, even though it's kind of generic-y, works so good to at least start the prospect conversations. And as I said earlier, once they say yes, that immediately identifies interest. That immediately qualifies them a little bit more as a lead. Oh, they are interested in my topic. They do want my tips. They do want my free ebook. Now, when they say yes, you follow up with the free content, and it's worth your time to do a little bit more personalization, to banter a little bit. And if the person says no or no thanks, great, cross them off your list and move on to the next person. Maybe they don't have a need right now. Maybe they're retired. Maybe they already do this in-house. Maybe they already have a guy. Whatever it is, a no is just as good as a yes because it gets you to the next step. Next up, I want to touch on a pay-to-play feature of LinkedIn called InMails. So if you're not familiar with this, if you have a paid subscription to LinkedIn, like Sales Navigator, you get access to a certain number of InMail credits every month, and that changes. It depends on what plan you have, so I won't say you get 20. I don't know. It changes every month, and sometimes they roll over and sometimes they don't. But here's what InMails are, if you're not familiar. InMails are basically a way for you to force feed a one-on-one message into someone else's inbox. It looks more like an email as well. It has a subject line, it has text, and then it has a signature area. So it's a little more formal. But the whole point of an InMail is if you and I are not connected at the first degree. So say I sent you an invitation, you didn't accept it, but I still really want to contact you. I can pay or use one of these credits to force feed a one-on-one message to you. And the nice thing about InMails is LinkedIn will make sure that the other person sees it, and LinkedIn will kind of pester the person and be like, hey, you have an InMail. Did you check it yet? And they'll, make sure that the person either accepts it and opens it or rejects it. And the way that InMails work is if someone, quote, accepts your InMail, you get the credit back. So it doesn't cost you anything. And then you can continue the conversation one-on-one for free in that InMail thread. If they reject your InMail, you lose the credit, and then you have to, use another one to move on to the next person, which is fine, right? So the way that InMails work, I use the same approach. I just do that one sentence, again, because I'm reaching out cold and I just want to qualify interest. So say I'm reaching out to someone, I might use a subject line like quick question or free ebook ? Or tips on blank ? And I'll say curious first name. Should I send over a free digital copy of my ebook? Insert the title. Or curious first name. Would you be interested in my best free tips on how XYZ type of audience can get ABC type of benefit? And then that's it. Just super short, super to the point. And then they can accept the InMail and reply yes or thumbs up. And if they do, then we can continue the conversation. So InMails are a nice feature where you might as well use them. If you're paying for Sales Navigator or similar, you're going to get a certain amount of these every month. And again, depending on whatever phase LinkedIn is in at the time, they either roll over, and if you don't use them all in a month, they roll over to the next month, or they become use it or lose it. So I really like InMails as something extra to do. I've seen good results from them. The same approach with one-on-one messaging works for InMails. Super short, to the point, one sentence. And I like using kind of curiosity-based subject lines because it will ask you for a subject line. So that's basically where you just say, want my best free tip, want free tips on blank, or free ebook ? Or quick question, just to kind of get them going, okay, what's this? So next up, I'll cover a couple of current loopholes. I'm going to say current because as of this recording, these are loopholes you can use. LinkedIn changes all the time. And that's why I said, early in the author's note at the beginning of the book, it's hard because if you try to put too many specific tools or things in there, LinkedIn may not let that work anymore, or it may go away or whatever. These are ones that have been around for a while, so I'm confident sharing them here in the recording. But basically, there's a couple of ways that you can get more one-on-one engagement going beyond just inviting someone to connect, waiting for them to accept, then sending a one-on-one message, or paying to send a one-on-one InMail. There's a couple other things. One is called open profiles. So if you're not familiar with this, when people set up their LinkedIn account, they have an option. There's a button for most people that they can toggle on or off that says, hey, do you want to have an open profile? And if you say yes, you're basically saying to LinkedIn, hey, anyone and everyone can message me. I'm cool, even if we're not connected first degree. I'm fine with letting people send me messages. If they turn it off, then no, people can't send you messages unless they, invite you to connect or they pay to send an InMail. The beauty for you doing outreach is you can look and see, and I have graphics in the printed book, and then obviously in the bonus training, I have walkthrough videos. So if you go to linkedinriches.com/bonus, you can get the walkthrough videos and the screenshots of what this looks like. But basically, you go to someone's profile, and if they have an open profile, and there's a couple different ways to tell. One is they sometimes have a little orange LinkedIn like icon around the messaging area, which indicates, oh, it's an open profile. You can message for free. The other way to simply try it is if you're not connected to someone, go to their profile, click on the little drop-down menus around, connecting and messaging, click on message, and one of two things will happen. If they have an open profile, it will open up your inbox, and it'll say free message. And it'll look like an InMail. It'll have a subject line and a message box, but at the bottom it will say, this is a free InMail. And then if you click Y, a little explanation, it'll say, oh, they have an open profile. So open profiles equal free InMails. That's the easiest way to say that. If someone has an open profile, you can send them a free InMail. And basically what that means is you can get more one-on-one messages out beyond just waiting to connect with someone or paying for an InMail, because they've told LinkedIn, listen, I'm cool. Anyone and everyone can message me. So again, there's a couple different ways to find it. One is if they have a little, as of this recording, a little orange icon, a little LinkedIn logo that's bright orange. That indicates visually. There's other tools and things we can talk about later. It's in the the bonus training area of how to indicate that or pull out profiles that have it. And then the other one is just click on message them. If it's a free open profile, it'll immediately open up an InMail and it'll say free. If it's not, it'll say you have to pay, like, do you want to use one of your InMail credits to send it? And then you can decide to pay to message them. So bottom line is that's a nice little loophole. There's a couple other ones I'll talk about as well. Another one is group messaging. So if you haven't heard of that, basically LinkedIn, back in the day was real popular with professional groups. LinkedIn is notorious for this. They build out all these features on the platform and then they kind of forget about them and they become like this forgotten little wastelands digitally. Groups is one of those. Nobody uses them anymore really. But LinkedIn built all these professional groups, which you can still access. And the idea was, hey, we're going to gather people in a group, like a Facebook group, but only for LinkedIn. And it's going to be around a topic or, people who want to network in a certain industry. So it'll be like, a LinkedIn group for small business owners in Minnesota, or a LinkedIn group for sales professionals in manufacturing, or a LinkedIn group for SEO tips, and let's join in this group. And the idea was everyone in the group can hang out, share best practices, share advice, talk to each other and network. Of course, what happened with LinkedIn groups, marketers ruin everything. They just turned into spam fests where everyone's just shamelessly self-promoting and throwing out links to their stuff and buy this. And so nobody really uses them anymore. The loophole is if you join a LinkedIn group and you have to get accepted. So the way that you find it as of this recording is go into the LinkedIn search box, type in the type of group you'd want to join, like, or type in a job title or a topic like, sales professionals or hospitals. Type in hospital CEOs and then filter the search results by groups, and it will pull up if there's any groups for hospital CEOs. Then you could join the group, and if you get approved and accepted, depending on how the group is set up, some automatically approve you, some an administrator has to manually approve you, and you may or may not get approved. It may or may not work. They may or may not still be active in the group looking at it and approving. So don't worry if you don't get accepted. It's just like some groups are kind of dead and the administrator's not paying attention. Other groups you'll get into right away. The point is, it's not about using the group and posting content. The loophole is once you get accepted into a LinkedIn group, you can message anyone in the group for free, even if you're not connected as first degree people connections. Meaning, if I join a group of franchise consultants and get accepted into a franchise consultant group on LinkedIn, in theory, maybe there's 5,000 people in there. They're all, in theory, mostly franchise consultants. I can go through that group list, look at the member role, and I can click on a little message icon next to each person's face and name, and I can send messages for free, which is awesome because I don't have to be connected to the person. I don't have to pay to use an email, anything like that. Since we're both in the same group, we can message each other one-on-one for free. Now, LinkedIn has mostly closed this loophole as of this recording. It used to be unlimited, so I could go into a group with 500 people and message 100 of them in a day, right? And then do it again the next day. They've closed it down where they'll kind of limit it. It might be 5, 10, 15 a week. It's still something, so it might be completely closed if you test it now. I'm not sure, but it's worth trying. Try joining a few groups that you think where all your ideal prospects are hanging out. Again, just do it through LinkedIn search based on the job title, the role, the topic, filter by groups, look at the groups. Does it look like the type of group where your prospects are hanging out? Request to join. If you get approved by the moderator, you can also message the moderator to ask if they'll accept you. If you get in, then filter it by the member list, look through the member names, and then you can message each person one at a time for free. So again, it'll limit how many total you can send in a week, but that's another good little loophole. The last loophole I want to mention is a really good one with cold emails. So most people, when they set up their LinkedIn profile, have a contact info area. So you can look at their profile page, and then there's a little text or a button that says contact info. Some people even put their email on their profile page, like contact me, phone number, email. So you can basically pull out people's emails and message them one time, one off, with a cold email. Now, I'm not recommending that you scrape LinkedIn and grab everyone's email and spam them and blast them on an email list that they never requested to be part of. This happens to me, and it drives me crazy. I all of a sudden find myself on these random email lists that have nothing to do with me, that have no context for a conversation, that are very obviously just newsletter blasts where somebody scraped or bought my email and just shoehorned it on there. Don't do that. It doesn't work. It's spammy and it'll get you in trouble. People will report your email. I would not do that. Again, it's just not effective. What you do is you take the person's email and then you copy and paste it into your email client and you send a one-off message. And you basically use a subject line like LinkedIn ? And then you send an email, say, hey, I noticed your profile over on LinkedIn. I realize we're not connected yet. I know people don't often check LinkedIn, so I thought I would just send you a quick note. Would you be interested in my best free tips on blank? Or would you be interested in a free copy of my ebook on blank? Again, the idea is a short, simple email with context for the conversation, where you're basically saying, in the subject line, something about LinkedIn, so they know, oh, this is how you found my email. Hey, I came across your profile on LinkedIn, could be the opening line, or hey, I found you on LinkedIn. And then you can say, I know people aren't logged in there all the time, and that's why I thought I'd send you a quick email. Then do your one-sentence message. Would it be helpful if I sent over my best tips on blank? And then just leave it at that. Or I help people do blank. Would you be interested in my best free tips on that? Something very short and simple. So again, try that, see if it works. It's a fast and easy way to offer something of value to a prospect you find on LinkedIn outside of waiting for them to accept an invite to connect or paying for an email. It's just another way to reach more people in a more creative way that's not totally cold, because you can say, hey, I found you on LinkedIn. Not sure if you ever log in over there. Would this be helpful? I'm just trying to, provide some value, etc. So, to be clear as well, not everybody will have their email listed on their LinkedIn profile. If you click on the contact info section, not everybody has an email there. Not everybody has, some people put their phone numbers in there. Again, I'm not recommending you just spam people. I just try it as a one-off message. So it's clearly from John Nemo's email to this person's email. It's not a blast. It's not a newsletter, but it does work. It does work, and people do respond, and it's another way to kind of grow an audience, get your content in front of people, start conversations with someone who because you filtered it on LinkedIn, is an ideal lead for you. Next up, I want to touch on a question I get asked all the time, which is, well, how many people should I reach out to on LinkedIn? How many people should I try to reach out to one-on-one, on LinkedIn every day, week after week, month after month? The short and the easy answer is as many as you can, right? There's no limit. There's 1 billion to get to. So if you build a great list of prospects in Sales Navigator, all these people should be great clients, great prospects. So to me, it's worth taking the time to reach out to 20, 30, 50, or even 100 of these people every single day. Since you're using a simple one-sentence message, right, invite, email, whatever, it's not like it's that hard to do this pretty quickly. To be able to kind of copy and paste and build and work through and use some of these loopholes, scale as many as you can. The answer of how many people should I reach out to, as many as you can. The reason is you need volume. You need to know not everyone's logged into LinkedIn every second of every day. Not everyone checks their inbox every day. Not everyone is ready right now. Not everyone has the issue you solve as a crisis right this moment. Their hair isn't on fire today, but it might be later. So you've got to just reach out to enough people to kind of keep that flow going, keep that volume high. Another question I get asked all the time, when do you consider someone a lead on LinkedIn? How do you qualify that term? When are they a lead, right? Now, there's a lot of debate on this, and really there's no right or wrong answer. I'll just explain how I classify someone as a lead, and then you can decide if you like it or not. For me, it's really simple. Once someone says yes, they're interested in my free tips or my ebook, to me, they're a lead. The reason is really simple. It's intent and interest. They're saying, I'm interested in this topic and I intend to look at what you have on it. So they're showing interest. They want my free tips. They want to learn more about it. To me, that, indicates, okay, they are now in my mind a lead. Next, and much more importantly, is qualifying them. And let's talk about that. So how do you best qualify a lead on LinkedIn? And that's one of the biggest frustrations that people come to me with time and time and time again is I'm talking to so many unqualified leads, people that don't have any money, people that aren't ready, tire kickers, this, that, time wasters. And let me tell you this, let you know a little secret here. There's no shortage of those guys. There's no shortage of tire kicking, time wasting people happy to clog up your calendar on LinkedIn. They are happy to waste your time. And remember the story I told earlier where I dressed up, drove across town, stressed myself out, put on this great presentation for 2 hours, gave up all this energy and expertise in person to this one random prospect. And they were like, yeah, well, thanks for the info. I don't know. If we ever use it, we'll let you know. I was like, remember, you have to qualify people before you give up the one thing that you have in finite amount, which is your time. That's your most precious asset. Protect it at all costs. Don't get desperate. Don't be scarcity. And also, it's so frustrating and draining and defeating to talk to unqualified people all day. You start to feel like a failure. You start to feel like, what am I doing wrong? This is never going to work. Let me tell you, it's a whole new world when you get qualified leads. It's so much better. Now, let me talk about this, but before you can qualify a lead, you need to fix your feelings. And I talked about this, earlier in the book, but when I was first beginning my business, I was so scared of missing an opportunity. I would drop whatever I was doing and take any call or any meeting or any Zoom or any coffee the moment somebody expressed even just a tiny minimal interest, microscopic level of interest in my services. That ended up having me do all these dumb things, driving across town, giving up my whole day, right? I also figured out I gave up all my authority and all my leverage because I didn't value my time and I was teaching other people not to value it either. It's like going back to a great line from John Michael Morgan's book, Branding is a Machine. He's like, if people get to pick your brain for a cup of coffee or a hamburger for a lunch, it just shows you your knowledge isn't worth very much, right? Sales is really all about authority and leverage. And if you give those up, you're going to attract the worst possible prospects and clients as a result. So think about this. If you're always available to meet, if you're one of those people that has your calendar online and it's always open all day, every day, anyone can book time with you anytime you want, what does that say? Like, you're setting yourself up for failure and frustration. So I'm going to actually go back to John Michael Morgan, my business coach right now, and give you a great example of how to handle this, even when kind of you have to fake it until you make it. So early in his journey, John was starting out as a real estate agent. He was really struggling, trying to sell homes. You know, he was a young guy. And one day he's at home with his girlfriend. Brooke is over hanging out, later to become his wife. The phone rings. Finally, right? A prospect finally calls. They wanted to meet with John about selling their house. And so Brooke is sitting there as John listens on the phone. And remember, he's sitting around watching daytime TV. He has no leads. He has no sales. He has no clients. Finally, the phone rings, right? And he sits there and he says to the person on the phone, well, I'm glad that you're interested. It's, I'm glad you were able to catch me between appointments. So I can't meet with you for the next 3 days. I'm booked up solid, but I do have an opening Friday at 10:30, which is kind of rare. So if you can make that work, I can definitely meet with you guys Friday at 10:30. And then while he's doing all this, the Brooke is looking at him like, are you nuts? What are you doing? Right. And the prospect's like, okay, thanks for fitting us in. We'll see you Friday. And he hangs up, and his, future wife Brooke says, what are you doing? Like, why wouldn't you jump on this right away? Why don't you hop off the couch and meet with them this second? You need the business. And John said something very wise to her. He said, yeah, but if I look like I'm not busy, they're not going to want to work with me. And he's right. Even though he's kind of faking it at that point, John didn't want it to look like he could just drop everything on a whim and meet with someone who showed some, modicum of interest in his business and his services. Because do you want to meet with a real estate agent who has no listings and no clients and no sales and nowhere to be? You're like, no, I want the agent who's super busy and selling homes like hotcakes and can squeeze me in because they're important and got a lot going on. And so, again, I really understand that after reading his book, Branding Against the Machine. And I just said it earlier, but, I'll quote it directly from John's book, where if you're willing to do coffee meetings or, hey, can I pick your brain over lunch type stuff, or let's network. John says this. He says, if someone says, I'd like to take you out to lunch and pick your brain, if you let someone do that, in exchange for your expertise, you're showing them your expertise isn't worth much. You're killing your authority for a cheeseburger and fries. Authorities don't trade their knowledge for lunch. You shouldn't either. And he says the other issue is perceived value. If someone gets good advice and it only costs them a cup of coffee, then where's the motivation to implement any of the ideas? If someone has no skin in the game, they're far less likely to take action. Now, if they had paid you $10,000 to go to lunch, they would take action on every single item you gave them, correct? And then he says, on a side note, if you want to pay me $10,000 to go to lunch, name the place. That's his sense of humor. But again, that's the idea. You want to stop being so available and so willing to meet anywhere, anytime, and drop everything because someone says they're interested. Now, I learned this the hard way, driving across town, letting people do that before, I was able to finally kind of say, no, I got to protect my time, protect my calendar. And when I came to John after going through his book, he had built such a frame of leverage and authority. Remember, I was all but begging him to take me as a client. That's the position you want to be in. Even if you need to fake it till you make it, that's what you need to do. Now, listen, it's hard. It's hard when you're in a season of scarcity, when you're in a season where you're like, well, I do need leads. I do need sales. I hate not, just jumping on something right away. Every single time I've done that, it's backfired. You know what I mean? So every time I've said, I'm going to break my own rules. I'm just going to take the coffee meeting. I'm going to, let them buy me lunch. Inevitably, it's been a disaster. I fall for it every time. It's like Charlie Brown and Lucy pulling away the football. I think it's going to be different this time. And it all comes down to mindset and belief. This stuff, confidence is contagious. Authority, positioning, leverage. If you don't act like the kind of quality person you want to be, if you don't act like the high-level, high-end, high-ticket consultant or business owner that you want to be, you'll never become that. So if you're like, well, I want to charge this much and I want to have these types of clients, but I'll still drop everything for a cup of coffee if someone sends one message, you're never going to be that, that consultant, that level. It takes discipline and it takes courage, and we'll get into how to get to that in a little bit. The other thing I want to talk about with this whole dynamic is really understanding why your content becomes currency. The other kind of key to this whole story with John Michael Morgan and the book and everything else is how content can be used to qualify people. It can qualify the leads in a way that a Zoom call or a one-on-one call or even a one-on-one message cannot. And I shared this earlier, but if someone reads an entire ebook about you, 5,000, 10,000 words, sees photos, reads your whole story, they are infinitely more warmed up as a prospect and qualified versus someone who just meets you for the first time on a live call or looks at your profile page on LinkedIn. The key is using this free content as currency. That's your currency to, quote, buy the time, interest, and attention of the prospect. I love this approach. I love it because the amount of energy and time it takes to do it the opposite way is insane. If you had to meet with each person one-on-one and you had to start from the beginning and tell your story and then live in person in the room or on Zoom, you had to be on your game. You had to have good energy. You had to be well-spoken. You had to tell your story really well and in a good way that hooked them in. You had to then demonstrate expertise and give them a bunch of good advice. And then you had to pivot and build all this rapport. That's really hard to do at a large scale, one-on-one, face-to-face, meeting. Like it just drains you. It takes a lot out. And the person might not be ready. They may love it, but they may be like, yeah, I can't address this till Q3 when our budget is approved. Like, oh, shoot. Well, we should have met in Q3. So the reason content is great is it does all that work for you and it doesn't take any of your energy or time. Because when your content is done well, it will deliver everything you normally would have to spend several sometimes live meetings and lots of FaceTime building, which is telling your story, building rapport, showcasing your personality, demonstrating your communication style. If you do that all with content that's done well, that shares these powerful stories about you and your journey and your experience, it demonstrates your expertise, it provides examples of how you've helped other people just like your prospect to get a certain outcome, that's all being done, and the prospect is consuming that on their time. You're not having to sit there in front of them and explain it all over and over and over again. You've bottled up your best story. You've bottled up your best advice. You've bottled up your best insights, and you can just hand it to them as a digital piece of content, an ebook or whatever. Now you can do that at scale. So you can share that, when someone says yes with 10, 20, 50, 100 people a day, they can take their time when they want, when it's convenient, when they have a moment to sit down and go through your content, your ebook, instead of you having to do countless screening calls or free consultations, which just tie up your time and your energy. And right, it's the same rapport building that you can do through the content. I love this approach with content because the prospect does all the heavy lifting. It's on them. They need to make time and consume your on-demand content. Now, again, I know it's hard if you're in a season of scarcity and it can feel scary not jumping on the calls. And I talked about this earlier, but this literally happened the other day. I had somebody, I don't know how they found my number. They found it and left me a voicemail. And they said in the voicemail, hey, I just want to chat. I saw you have all these different steps on your website before you can talk live. Like you fill out a type form and all these things. And I just want to chat. I have some ideas. I want to talk to you about your business. So I listened to the voicemail. And I'm half tempted to call him back right away because I'm free in the moment, but I stop myself because I've learned over the years that if I let the prospect set that frame, I'm giving up all my leverage and all my authority. I'm also training the prospect to ignore my processes and my procedures and dictate how they want me to work for them. I'm basically turning my clients into mini bosses as a result. I've learned this the hard way. So it takes courage and it takes trusting yourself to stand by these lead qualifying processes. And again, I said earlier, I've done it both ways. I've stuck to my guns and said, no, I'm not going to do that. And then I've also veered off track to try to jump on the calls. And as I said, without fail, every time I do the latter and I'm going to jump on the call and call them back, it never works. Right? It never works. And in the case of this person who called, it's funny because I handed them over to a member of my team and it ended up they were not a lead at all. And they would have been a waste of my time. And being a polite Minnesotan, I would have known how to extricate myself from the call and I would have been stuck and all this stuff. And I would have had to, they didn't know anything about us. They just wanted to have a call, right? And I was like, well, read the book, man. That'll give you the whole backstory. I don't want to sit here and tell you the story for an hour on the phone, right? Anyway, In this next section, we're going to cover the 6 steps that you want to walk through to really qualify and close leads on LinkedIn. So I want to end this section here kind of, again, summarizing my thoughts on invites and in-mails and messages and some of the loopholes. And then next up, we're going to dive into those 6 specific steps that we want to use to really qualify and close your leads on LinkedIn.